Well, it's great to be here today. Last week we started a series, so we showed a video last week. If you weren't here last week, I'd really encourage you to go back to the website and watch the video of the guy that presented, David Ramsey. So we started a series called Life, Money, Hope. And last week he talked about, it was such a great video, and he presented this formula to us that if we would use this formula with our finances, that it would work every time. He presented it as a biblical formula. And I would really encourage you to go back and watch it. And here's basically what he said. I went to his website this week, and so I was reading it, and he said that he's had millions of people implement this plan that he put forth. And he's had 5 million people that have put that plan into practice and gotten out of debt. 5 million people. It wasn't very complicated, but here this was about the biblical finance. He said, number one thing you got to do biblically is you need to get out of debt. That you can't be slave to your money. Get out of debt. Number two, he said you need to act your wage. How many have ever been told to act your age? It's kind of the same thing. Act your wage. Did you know that the average Canadian spends $1.70 almost for every dollar they make? That is not acting your wage. $1.70. So if I make $1, I spend $1.70. So get out of debt, act your wage. Basically, do not spend more than you make. Seems pretty simple. But millions of people have got it wrong. Number three, get on a budget. Most households don't have a budget. People who fail to plan to fail. Get on a budget, stick to a budget. No one likes a budget. Number four, save money. His point was, are you ready for an emergency? If an emergency comes, are you ready? And a lot of us think, yeah, I'm ready because I have a credit card. I'm ready, I have a line of credit. I don't think that's quite what he thinks. He's saying, be ready for an emergency, because if you're ready, but you have to save money. And fifthly was you have to give. You got to be a giver, not just to your church, but just in generally in life. Are you a giver? We're going to be talking about the next step of this is just how to get out of debt. Now, I want to be totally clear. I am not a financial guru by any stretch of the imagination. So there's probably plenty of people in this room that you know much more about finances than me. And what I'm going to present to you today is going to be very, very simple. And so I know some people are going to be saying, well, you got to spend money to make money. And we're not here to discuss all of that. We're just talking about personal finance. And today we're going to be talking about breaking the bondage of debt. I've been thinking about this and thinking about how often we come to church and we talk about things that are spiritual, or we classify them as spiritual. We talk about salvation or forgiveness. And so today we say, we're just going to talk about something practical. We're going to talk about debt. Actually, I think debt is actually one of the most spiritual things that we can talk about, because it holds us back spiritually in so many other ways. I'm no financial genius. But I've noticed over the years that we get into debt because we attach emotion to stuff. We have emotion to it. So you say, well, I have to go on this trip because I'm making memories, so I'm going to charge this trip. Or I need to buy this thing, whatever it is, because this is a status figure, and we attach this emotion to it. There's nothing relaxing about debt. I talked about that last week. He talked about that last week. Debt brings on stress. Stress brings on all sorts of other problems. And I really believe, I said this last week, but I really believe that the Acadian people are amongst the most generous people that I've ever met. But we can't be as generous as we would like because of debt. If there was a need presented here today, everybody in this room would want to help with that need. But not everybody could. See, this isn't about giving your money to a church. This is about us walking in the freedom that God has for us. New Brunswick household income in New Brunswick is a household, that's if 2 people work, $59,347. The Canadian household average is $70,336. The average income in Kent County is $33,000 and change. That equals a take-home of $25,000 after tax. That is not a lot of money. The truth is, we live in a suppressed economy in New Brunswick. Incomes are low. The average debt in Canada, consumer debt, not mortgages, but consumer debt, is $22,081. If you have a credit card, and on that credit card you owe $10,000, and the interest rate is 15%, which is low for a credit card, but we'll just be generous. If you pay just the minimum payment on that credit card of $10,000, just the minimum payment, it'll take you 28 years to pay it off. And it will cost you an additional $12,000 in interest. I'm not a financial guru, but I know that's not a good plan. I'm not sure where everyone in this room falls on the debt scale. But in your bulletin, there's a piece of paper, and it's just going to lay out the points for us, and then there's an activity for you to do kind of on your own in the back. But really, the only way to really get out of debt is to really be honest about how much debt you have. And so I would encourage you to start to write down your debts. I mean, we have car loans, credit cards, loans, store cards, etc., etc. Maybe you owe money to people or friends, but not including your mortgage. So for me, for example, I make $45,000 a year, okay, before taxes. So that's what I make. I have a little bit of debt. I have a car debt like most people have. Okay, I have 1 year left on my car. So about a few months ago I went and I thought my car is kind of a piece of junk, so I put a plan together so I could pay this debt off sooner. So I have 1 year left to pay on my car. And I have another small debt, which I have accumulated because of emergencies. Because we don't save for emergencies. Now don't judge me. You're looking at me like, don't judge me. Okay? But our emergency funds are usually a credit card or a line of credit. And then we create debt. I have no credit card debt. There's a message found in Proverbs 6:5, and this is a weird passage, but I'm going to read it to you. Proverbs 6:5, it says this: "Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler." Proverbs 6:5. What a weird passage. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. What's this passage about? The truth is, this passage is about money. Has having debt in your life ever made you feel like you were being hunted? By the phone calls? Debt makes us feel like we're being hunted. The calls, the balancing money, the moving money from this card to this card to make the payments work. I would really encourage everybody in this room over the next month, we're going to be finishing this series next week, but over the next month, I would encourage you to read the book of Proverbs. You can read one proverb per day. There's 31. Just read them. Just one per day. Just go through. I think there's 31. You just read them. And this passage is telling us that just like a hunter or a lion is intense after a gazelle, that if we are going to get out of debt, we need to have gazelle-like intensity. I went on YouTube and looked at lions hunting gazelles. I wouldn't do that if I were you. But the only times the gazelle got away from the lion is when the gazelle was more intense than the lion. When the gazelle is more intense than the hunter. And so in your sheet it says you need to have gazelle-like intensity. I mean, if you watch National Geographic, when the gazelle, the only way the gazelle gets away is if they're more intense. The next thing that I just want to put out to you today, because many of us in this room, you've tried to get out of debt, whether that was, a $5,000 debt or $22,000 or $30,000 debt, and you've tried to get out of debt and you can't figure out a plan of how to do it. So I just want to just give you, this is not mine, this is Gordon Ramsay's, he's a chef. David Ramsay. This is from him, so I'll give it to you. So he calls this the debt snowball. And you can write that down. And so I'm just going to give an example for you, okay? So say you're here and you owe $500 at Victoria's Secrets on your card, okay? Well, good for you. But let's say you owe $500 at Victoria's Secrets, okay? Let's say you owe $4,000 because you bought a wedding ring that you couldn't afford. And you charged it. So let's pretend you have a $6,000 line of credit. And let's say you have a $5,000 car payment. This marker's not working very well. A $5,000 car. So these numbers just total up the average Canadian, okay? So then you have a $7,000 another line of credit that you move between the other line of credit so you can pretend like you paid it. I believe, now I don't know your situation, but I'm just going to say what I'm going to say to you. I believe that most people in this room can be out of debt within 2 years if you're in debt. But I want you to know it's going to be really, really hard. So the first thing to break through the bondage of debt is you need to have gazelle-like intensity. You cannot give up. It's going to get harder before it gets easier, and it's not going to be fun. But you need to have gazelle-like intensity. And the next thing you need to do, you need to use the debt snowball. So everyone knows that you have these payments, whatever they are, and all of these things have a minimum payment. And if you have something with $10,000 at 20% interest, it's going to take you 28 years to pay it off, and you figure, why bother? But here's what you need to do. You need to go to all of these things. You need to list them on the back of your sheet in order from your smallest payment to your biggest, your smallest amount you owe to your biggest amount. So how I listed them. $500 for Victoria's Secrets, $4,000, $6,000, or so $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. You need to put them in order of how you owe them. Okay? So once you've done that, then you need to make a decision that you're just going to pay the minimum payment on all of these. Just the minimum payment. And you're going to pay the biggest payment you can on your smallest. Okay? So this is the big payment. So I don't know what that would be. Say it's $200. Then it's going to take you 2.5 payments and you can get it done. Then once you get this taken care of, you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to be like, okay, I'm done. I paid off my Victoria's Secret. Is it Victoria's Secret or Victoria's Secret? Anyways, that's for another day. So once you get it paid off, you're going to feel great about yourself. You're going to feel really good. You're going to be like, oh, I paid off a debt that you could have had around for a long time, but I paid it off. So even if it's $1,000, whatever it is, paid off. Then once you get this $200 payment, once you get it paid off, you need to take this and you need to snowball it into the next one. So $200 plus the minimum payment. You need to pay this one up with gazelle-like intensity. The most money that you can put down, you got to make decisions not to eat here, not to go here, and you need to pay off this. And once you get this done, you need to move these 2 payments over to your next payment. And you need to add this payment to this payment. And with gazelle-like intensity, and just let the snowball go bigger. Now these payments will add up. And before long, you'll be making large payments on a smaller debt. And you say, man, then I got to wait all this time to get to here. By the time you get here, if you have gazelle-like intensity, and if you are pumped and you work at this, your payments are going to be so much larger that you'll be able to pay off $7,000 just as quick as you paid off $4,000, because you've got this snowball that's going in your favor. Usually the snowball of debt goes the other way. It picks up more debt as it comes until it eventually crushes you. But if we work the snowball debt in our advantage, you can get out of debt. And this just isn't just a practical, you know what, this is very spiritual. Because often we get ourselves in debt by trying to fill a void inside of us that only God can fill. So if you will do with gazelle-like intensity, the problem is you'll do it for 3 or 4 months, and then you'll just say, oh, that was good, I'm doing so good, I don't have to do this anymore. You've got to do it until it's done. And it's going to feel hard, and it's going to be hard. But if you snowball your debts, you can become debt-free. I'm going to give you 5 steps today, 5 scriptures. It's going to seem a little odd, but the first thing you need to do to get out of debt, number 1, the first step to breaking away from the bondage of debt is you need to save. Now, David Ramsey recommends that you have 3 to 6 months of expenses. Don't panic yourself with that, because that's a ways to go. We all have a ways to go. Start off, whatever you've got to do, get $1,000 saved. Don't try to say, I got to get 3 to 6 months. Don't worry about that. Get $1,000. That's the way if your tires go, you have money to fix your tire, and you don't have to borrow money. It says this, in a house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, Proverbs 21:20. Those that are wise store up food. Those that are wise prepare for times that are going to be leaner. The first step in getting out of debt is save $1,000. If you've got to go home today and figure out something to sell in order to save $1,000, do it. Because you will not get out of debt. I will not get out of debt unless you have an emergency fund. Because this right here will always become your emergency fund. Over and over and over. So the first step is save. I mean, you can only answer this yourself, but for those of you or us that aren't saving, why? Really, there's 2 reasons as far as I'm concerned. There's either you feel like there's not enough money coming in, or there's too much money coming out. I mean, those are really, at the end of the day, that's what it is. There's either not enough money coming in or too much money going out. But you're going to stay in debt if you don't save, because when things comes up, you have to borrow. So it doesn't matter what it is. You've got to make an emergency trip somewhere, and if you don't have any savings, you have to borrow. Whether that's borrowing from a credit card, or borrowing from a line of credit, or borrowing from your mom or your dad, it doesn't matter. If you've got to borrow, you're going to go in more debt. David Ramsey says 3 to 6 months. I mean, I know that's scary, 3 to 6 months of expenses, but just start with 1,000. And you have to define what an emergency is. Don't throw anything at me. But shoes are not an emergency. Well, unless you're wearing the shoes Scott was wearing the other day. Those were an emergency, because the whole sole fell off the bottom. But shoes are not an emergency. A fishing rod is not an emergency. You've got to define what an emergency is. But start with 1,000. Ramsey said last week, he says, you notice that bad things happen to you when you're broke? And I believe that's the devil. The devil says, you know what, you're down? I'm coming for you. I believe that if we prepare ourselves better and get out of debt, that the devil is more likely to leave us alone. The second step of getting out of debt is to stop borrowing money. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender, it says in Proverbs 22:7. Stop borrowing money. The average Canadian spends $1.70 for every dollar they make. How do you think that your life would be changed financially if you stopped using credit cards and taking out unnecessary loans, if you were debt-free? How would your life change? What if you stopped borrowing from family and friends or the line of credit? The average take-home pay in New Brunswick is $25,000. In Kent County, it's $25,000. That's $480 a week. $480, and this thing is driving me crazy. $480. Oh, I just used the wrong one. $480. Okay? That is not a lot of money. That's the average. How many know that money goes in a flash? If you got to buy food for your family, you got to do this, you got to do that. But here's the trap, and I see this so often in our culture. I see this, and this is what I call the trap. If you only get $480 a week and you're not saving any money, and you borrow money, it doesn't matter where you borrow it from, but let's say you borrow $100 to get you to your next paycheck. Your next paycheck is still going to be $480, but really it's $380. And then your rent comes. Because we don't plan for our rent or our mortgage usually. We just pay it when it's all due. And if your rent comes after a couple weeks of borrowing 100, 25, 30, you're all of a sudden going to have a $200 paycheck with a $600 rent. Now, I'm not a pro, but I know that doesn't work. I know that you're now minus $400. So we have to borrow the money from a family member. We need to get it off our line of credit. And that's the trap. As soon as you borrow, you are one step into the trap. And there's two ways to be broke. Either you can waste all your money or you can have so many payments, you're just broke. The third step is this. The third step is to pray. It says this in Matthew 7:7. Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. I can't even count, as I look back this week over my life, I can't even count the many times that my back was against the wall, that I didn't know how it was going to happen. And I prayed and God helped me. The problem is we love to solve, we don't like to wait, so we love to solve problems on our own. So instead of waiting and giving God a chance to bail us out, we will go back and we will borrow. I think back to my life so many times. And I told you this before, but I can remember I've driven so many bad cars in my life. Every car that I ever owned pretty much had an engine job of some sort. I know you're thinking you should probably keep better care of your cars. But some of them it wasn't my fault. But God has delivered me out of the worst situations because I've prayed. And I say, God, I need your help. And now, this isn't going to be popular what I'm going to say. But prayer alone is not going to be enough. You need to pray, listen, and act. It's important to listen to God's wisdom. I want you to know this is going to be painful. We've all owned things that we can't afford. Some of us in this room, some of you in this room, are driving a vehicle you can't afford. We all have done it. And the process of getting out of debt is painful, but it's incredibly spiritual. Number 4, listen, don't hate me after I say this. The 4th step to get out of debt is sell something. I know maybe you need to sell something. I went on a cruise to Bermuda that we paid for with cash. But we went on a cruise to Bermuda, me and my wife. And we were there And Bermuda obviously is an island, and it was just, the marina there is just surrounded by all these yachts and boats. And I thought it was interesting because we were parked in Bermuda for 3 days and we went off the boat every day, but the boats never moved. And I noticed that. So one day we were on the bus and we were talking to this guy, and I said, what's with the boats? Like all this beautiful ocean, and these boats aren't moving. You know what he said to me? They can't afford it. He said they bought boats they couldn't afford. Now they can't afford to put gas in them. He said, so now they just treat them like their cottage. So people are on those boats all weekend. They just can't move them. What? What? I mean, we don't live on an island in Bermuda. But many of us have bought things that we can't afford. And we need to sell something. I don't know what that is. What are some of the things that you could sell to help improve your financial situation? Are you willing to sell them? If you're not, why not? That wasn't popular. Next. I think that what we need to understand is that in most of our households, there's a problem. There's either not enough money coming in, or there's too much money coming out. I'm going to be honest with you. I've helped dozens and dozens of people since I've been in Kent County. And I can only think of a couple people that the problem was not enough money coming in. The problem is always too much money going out. Almost always. And I always say to people, and if you've heard me say this, then we've talked about this, but everybody in this room, everybody, has a hole in their bucket. Has a financial hole in their bucket. Now, depending on how much money you have dictates how big that hole is. For most of you in this room, it's a $10 hole. And you go through money $10 at a time. I can remember sitting in my office with a friend of mine once, and I said this, and he was like, no, I don't. I'm telling you, Troy, we just don't make enough money. I said, I bet you have a $10 hole. He said, no, I don't. I'm telling you, Troy. I said, okay, open up your bank. I didn't look at it, he just opened it up. And I said, read off your top 20 transactions. $6, $8, $12, $15, $2, $6. See, those aren't bills, those are holes. And if you have more money, you just have a bigger hole in your bucket. It might be a $500 hole. And it becomes really difficult, but the truth is, you have to plug the holes. What are the holes in your bucket? And you may have to sell something to do that. But if things are really desperate, the final step to breaking free from debt is maybe you need to do one of two things. You either got to cut your expenses, or maybe you need to get a part-time job or bring in some extra income. Proverbs 6:6-8 says this. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no overseer or ruler. It stores up provisions in summer and gathers food at harvest. To use the ant as an example, that it stores up and prepares for later. What are some of the challenges that pop into your mind, just in your own self, that happen? How could this help you? Is there some way to figure out another small income, or to figure out how to cut expenses? I'd really encourage you this week, the best that you can, to sit down with a piece of paper. If you didn't get one, you can go to the back and grab one. And start writing down all of your debts in order from smallest to largest. Find out all their minimum payments, and then start the debt snowball. I want you to know, getting out of debt doesn't mean that you take all of your debts and put them into your mortgage. That's not getting out of debt. Getting out of debt means paying off your debt. so that you can live in the freedom that God has you live. I really want all of us to get the most out of this series. So here's a few things that I would like you to do this week. Just 2 things. Fill out the back sheet. Every place you owe money. Smallest to lowest. Number 2, make a budget. Make a budget. I know I can hear it inside your heads right now. You're thinking, Troy, I've tried budgets, they don't work. I've tried this, I've tried that, I can't get it to work. Here's just an idea I'll leave with you. This is what I do, okay, as far as the budget goes. So when I get my paycheck every week, my pay gets deposited in my bank account on Thursday. So what I've done is I've gone to all of my bills, my electric bill, my cell phone bill, my mortgage, car payment, every bill that I have, and I've divided that bill by 4. Okay? So every week, my pay comes in, I tithe, and then 1/4 of every bill that I have goes out. Now you think, wow, you're really smart, good job. Well, not really. Because once I do that, all my bills are paid. Once I do that, I have money left over. See, that's where my system breaks down. Because let's say I have $200 a week. I do really dumb things with that $200. I don't save it. I just do dumb things. If you if you pay rent, then every week you'd put away some money for your rent. So that you're not trying to pay rent out of a $480 check when it becomes due. So make a budget. If you've never done a budget, start with one that's really simple. Try to figure out a way to save $1,000. This week I'm going to post, I'll put on Facebook and I'll text everybody out if you've subscribed to texting. One passage that you can read every day for 5 days. And one thing that you could pray about that'll help us deal with getting out of debt. It might seem really practical, but in closing today, I believe that getting out of debt is one of the most spiritual things that you can do. It has nothing to do with this church, but it's everything to do with you being able to do what God has called you to do. Remember, you're going to have to go at this with gazelle-like intensity. You're going to have to work the debt snowball. I believe that probably 90% of people can get out of debt in less than 2 years. I would encourage you, the first thing to do is to save $1,000 for emergencies. And starting right now, stop borrowing money. Start to pray about how God can help you. If you've got to sell something that you can't afford, sell it. If you've got to increase your income, figure out a way to do that. But honestly, it's easier to cut your expenses than it is to work more. There's only so much time in a day. And here's the truth. If there's anything that I could do to help you, please ask. Once we're done this series and the weather goes in our favor, we're going to start a small group. And the small group is going to be designed specifically for people who want to get out of debt. And if you want to get out of debt, no matter how bad you think it is, this is the group for you. And that way, you'll realize what is already true. Because 90% of you are sitting in this room thinking, I'm the only one. And the good news is 90% of people in this room are thinking the exact same thing you're thinking. My prayer is that we would be people who would live like God has asked us to live. So that we could give, we could go and do what God has asked us to do. So this morning I'd like us to do one last thing just in closing. Is I would like each of us just did in the quietness of this moment. We did this last week and I'd like you to do it again. Is to just bow your head and just think for a moment. God, what is it that's causing me to want to live or to keep living in debt? What is it? What is it that I'm trying to fill inside my life? What is stopping me from living in the freedom that you want me to live in? And I would really encourage you, just let God speak to you. God, what's the hole in my bucket? God, what do I have to do to not live in this stress? God, give me gazelle-like intensity. God, give me the intensity to do what you would have me to do. God, help me to plan. Help me to follow through on that plan. God, speak to each one of us today. God, I pray that you would speak to and that we would understand that this practical lesson that we've heard today has deep spiritual roots in our heart. And that we would not fill the void in our life with other things besides you. And God, I pray that you would lead us to whatever it is that's longing in us, that we would turn that to you. God, help us to do the hard things. And help us to know that we can ask you. And you will help us. In your name. Amen. Make sure that you drive safe today.